Okay.
Okay, very good. So we're starting on Daf Ayin Hey Amud Bet, the third to last line. Okay. I'm just going to point something out that maybe everybody knows, or if not, it's something I've sensed over the year that no one doesn't get pointed out. The third to last line begins, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avua, Amar Rav. This triumvirate of generations is very common in the Talmud. We have Rav's famous Talmidim. The most famous, perhaps, are Rav Huna. Second, if not equal to, is Rav Yehuda. Rav has sons, Rav Chiya bar Rav. But Rabba bar Avua is very clearly a Talmud of Rav, and I'm pretty sure the majority, if not the vast majority, of the cases in which he says things, it is said by Rav Nachman in his name. Whereas Rav Nachman seems to have been the Talmud, perhaps the Talmud Mufak of Rabba bar Avua, who was a crucial Talmud of Rav. Now, Rav Nachman himself lived in Neherda. He was the great Dayan of Neherda. In fact, he was the son-in-law of the Reish Galusa. Rav Nachman is quoted as quoting Shmuel on occasion. I think we might even have had one not that long before, if not in this sugya and in other sugyas. Rav Nachman lived to learn by Shmuel. Shmuel outlived Rav, and Rav Nachman must certainly have been one of Shmuel's very young Talmidim. Rav Nachman's father was one of the Safri Dayanim, who was the scribes of the Dayanim in the times of Shmuel. So his father was certainly a Talmud of Shmuel, but a scribe Talmud. And Rav Nachman learned by Shmuel, but Rav Nachman also learned by the great Talmidim of Shmuel. Who are the great Talmidim of Shmuel? Well, that's I believe. I better not say, but there's a Mar. I can't remember Mar Ukva or Mar Zutra. I'm sorry for not knowing which one. But Rav Nachman seemed to have learned by them. When it says Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, he may be quoting Shmuel directly, which is certainly possible. He may be quoting one of Shmuel's great Talmidim. In any case, Rav Nachman did have a direct connection with Rav, an indirect, I should say. I mean, a direct in terms of generations, indirect in terms of generations as well. Rav was the Rosh Hashiva in Surah. Shmuel was the Rosh Hashiva in Neherda. Rav Nachman lived in Neherda, and his connection with Shmuel is obvious. Rabba bar Avua seems to have been the Talmud of Rav, who learned by him undoubtedly in Surah, and moved from Surah to Neherda and was Mefarsim the Torah of Rav in Neherda, so that his great Talmud Rav Nachman could learn would learn the Torah of Rav. So as Rav Nachman's connection to Rav's Chidushim and Divrei Torah is via Rabba bar Avua almost always. And to Shmuel it was to some extent direct, to some other extent learning by the great Talmidim of Shmuel. Okay, so with that introduction, let's read what the Gemara says. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avua, Amar Rav, the third to last line. Shnei chatzeros. You have two chatzeros, v'gimel batin beinehem. And you have three houses in between the two chatzeros. It's not that hard to visualize. But if you would like to see a picture, this is one of the cases where the Gemara does, I should say, the pictures in the back of the Gemara. If you had it, it's the last picture on Daf Ayin Hey Amud Bet. It's on page 82 of the pictures. You can see the three houses. You can see a chatzer on either side of the three houses, right? Why they put the door in the middle one and not in the other two? Maybe there's some hidden understanding here that I am lacking. But in any case, you see the chatzer To the right, you see the chutzner to the left. They also made it on a diagonal. And you see there's a house on the outside of each chutzner, right? Everyone see that in the picture? Okay. But that is not, that's not part of the obvious description in the statement of Rav. So it's again, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Avua, Amar Rav. Shnei chatzeros, the gimel batim benehem. There are three houses in between the two chatzeros. Ze ba derech ze, v'nosein eruvo bazeh. V'ze ba derech ze, v'nosein eruvo bazeh. Ze nasa beis shar lezeh, v'ze nasa beis shar lezeh. Emsa'i havelei bayis sheminichim bo eruv. Ve'ein sarich litein es hapas. Okay, so the clear effort here is to make an eruv that will include the houses as well as the chatzeros on the other side of the houses, right? To the best of my understanding, the houses on the far side of the chatzeros, both of them, are irrelevant to the story. If there is something, there's also no indication in the picture that they are relevant, but they're part of the picture, but they're irrelevant to the halacha here. Okay, so what we're trying to do is to make an eruv, which is going to include all three houses and the chatzeros on either side of those three houses. And then the question is, where do you put the eruv, and who has to contribute to the eruv in order to make the eruv? Okay, we got it. That's our issue. So let's read the Gemara over again. Shnei chatzeros v'gimel batim b'neihem. That's clear in the picture. The zeba derech zeh. One comes from one side. V'nosein eruvu bazeh. We'll see in Rashi that zeba derech zeh means one comes from one house, one of the extreme house on one side, and puts his eruv in the middle house. Right. In other words, by doing so, he creates an eruv between himself and the middle house. And the other guy, the guy on the other side, does the exact same thing. He comes and makes an eruv with the middle house, and also puts his eruv in the middle house. Okay. Ze nasa beis shar lazeh, v'ze nasa beis shar lazeh. The two houses on the extreme are considered to be, each one is considered to be a beis shar to the chatzer on its outside. Okay, or a beis shar to the middle house. I guess that would be a better way of putting it. And are not appropriate places for putting the eruv, because they are a beis shar, and as we learned before, you don't put the eruv in the beis shar. The middle house is the house which should house the food of the eruv. In other words, they should bring the food of the eruv to the middle house. And it's the middle house which should not have to give bread towards the eruv. Only the outer houses should give bread towards the eruv. Okay? Now, if that wasn't clear, I'm going to explain to you what's not clear. To me at least, and maybe you'll. The question is, how many eruvin are being made over here? Is this one eruv, or are these two different eruvin that somehow merge in the middle house? In other words, Is it that the house on the right makes an eruv with the house on in the middle, and since the house on the right apparently has the rights to the chatzer, he includes the chatzer in his gift towards the eruv, and he does that, and then the guy on the other side does, of course, exactly the same thing. And so each one of the outside houses is going to make a separate eruv and put it to, and they're going to put it in the house in the middle, and this will allow the guy in the middle to go to either house and either chatzer, but the two extreme houses do not have a mutual eruv and will not be able to carry from their extremes into the other extreme, right? Now, that's one way of viewing what happens. So that there are two different eruvin that sort of meet or merge in the middle house, but they remain two different eruvin, and the result might be that you can't carry from the outer house and the outer chatzer to the other side. The other possibility is to view this whole thing as one big eruv, and the fact that they each put stuff in the middle house merges their eruvin, and you now can carry right across from one chatzer to the other chatzer. Okay, now I'm just going to point something out, which is just something that bothers me. It's nothing perhaps I didn't research this properly, but there's no Rambam on this halacha, which is a little bothersome. Does the Rambam not hold this way? If he doesn't, why doesn't he hold this way? I don't know what to do about that. Okay.
What's the special rules about a Beit Shar again? Wasn't it the Beit Shar doesn't have to be part of the eruv? Is that what was the rule?
The rule of the Beit Shar is that you can't put the eruv in the Beit Shar.
But also but Beit Shar has to be part of the eruv? I thought he doesn't have to be part of the Beit Shar. That's only we're studying one special rule is that you can't put the eruv in the Beit Shar. I thought he doesn't have to be part of an eruv, I thought also. That's not one of the rules that we learned last week.
Yeah, that's what I recall also. But the thing is, you're going to have to encompass him somehow or other. What'd you say?
No, I'm trying to understand. So what we're trying to do is get the guy on one side in the Beit Shar to be part of the. He doesn't need an eruv to be part of his chatzer. You need an eruv to be part of the other chatzer. Is that what we're trying to accomplish?
Yes, I'll say it in different words. If what you said is clear to everybody listening, then great. If what you said is not clear, perhaps what I'll say will be clear. There are people living in each of these three houses. If you live in the house, from your perspective, you're not a Beis Shar, right?
Oh, I realize that.
So from your own perspective, you're your house, and you're making an eruv with the guy in the middle. In terms of the far house is seen as a Beis Shar to the chatzer outside it, right? Or to the house that you are making an eruv with. It's the third house coming from either end is like an interference in what's going on. It's just a Beis Shar. It's not a real house from the internal perspective. We got it?
Yeah.
What makes it a Beit Shar from the perspective of the middle guy? Just because he's between him and the chatzer, regardless of the fact that he's a real house and real people and all that doesn't.
Yeah, right. That's what came out of the previous Gemara. That's hard to get around that. Okay. So let's see. Let's learn the Gemara with Rashi now. Okay. Again, I'm going to read the Gemara from the beginning, from the third to last line, and then we're going to learn the Rashi. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba, Rav Lo, Amar Rav. Shnei chatzeros v'gimel batim b'neihem. Zeh ba derech zeh v'nosein eruvo bazeh. Zeh ba derech zeh v'nosein eruvo bazeh. Ze nasa b'shar lazeh, ze nasa b'shar lazeh. Emsai havalei beis sheminichim bo eruv. Vein sarach litenis hapas. Rashi, third to last line, ein heim and beis. Ze ba b'derech ze. Ben chatzer zu ba derech bayis hapasuach lo. V'nasan eruvo be'emtsai. The master of one chatzer goes into the chatzer via the house that's open to his chatzer, and he puts his eruv in the middle house. Vasa bayis hapasuach lo kebeis shar la'avar derech alav. In other words, the guy who owns the one extreme chatzer views the middle house as a base shar to his chatzer, and makes an eruv with the middle house. La'avar derech alav le'emtsai. The middle house, the master of the extreme chatzer goes through the first house he comes into as a beit shar to get into is his beit shar, getting into the middle house.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Maybe I'm just missing something here, but I'm thinking about those two extraneous outside houses. The way Rashi is writing this is Ben Chatzer Ba Derech Bayit Patuach Lo. It doesn't sound like he's going through his own house. It sounds like he's coming from somewhere in the Chatzer and going through this Beit Shar. And maybe that's why the picture is taking this outside house. Maybe I'm dreaming this, but taking this extra outside house.
Maybe you're right. Maybe that's what's happening here. I missed that. Okay, let's try it Barry's way. Thank you.
I don't know if it has any effect. I'm just trying.
Let's give it
linguistically.
a try. Let's give it a try. Okay. Zeba b'derech zeh. Ben chatzer zu, who you say lives in the house on the outside of the chatzer. Good. Ba derech bayis hapasuach lo. He walks through the house that's open to his chatzer, on the other side of the chatzer. V'nasan eruvo be'emtsai, and puts his eruv in the middle house. V'asa bayis hapasuach lo kebeis shar la'avor derech alav le'emtsai, and the house that is open to his chatzer on the other side, he uses as a beis shar to get through to the emtsai house. Good, thank you. I think you're right. The Chaim ben chatzer ha'acheres on the other side does the same thing, of course. Chaim ben chatzer ha'acheres asa bayis hapasuach lo kebeis shar v'irev be'emtsai chatzer ha'acheres. Right? Okay. So no, let's accept what Barry says. Thank you, Barry. There's somebody living in the extreme houses, each of whom has a chatzer. The house that's adjacent to the chatzer on the other side is a beis shar of his chatzer to get through to the middle house. And that's what's going on both sides. Okay, that's the description in Rashi of the case. Thank you. Last line now. Ein echad midirei habatim ha'ela tzarich litain pas elu. Excuse me. None of the owners of these houses need give bread. No, let's try that again. Ein echad midirei habatim ha'ela tzarich litain pas elu mishum beis shar. The owners of the two houses immediately adjacent to the middle house, to the centrist house, need not give anything towards the eruv because they are a beis shar. Okay. We'll read over the Gemara soon. Meanwhile, let's just finish the Rashi. V'emsai mishum bayis sheminichim bo eruv. And similarly, the guy in the middle house, in the most middle house, also doesn't have to give because he is the house in which the eruv is put. Rashi on top of Ayin Vav Amud Aleph. Zeh nasa beis shar lazeh. Kol bayis nasa beis shar lechatzer. Shehu pasuach lo. Each house becomes a beis shar to the Chatzer that it is open to. Okay, so let's take Barry's interpretation. People are living in the two extreme houses, and also in the middle. They could be living in all the houses. They're living in, or people living in all these houses. But what's crucial for us is that the extreme houses are trying to make an eruv with each other and with everybody else. The house in the immediately on the other side of the Chatzer, it's considered to be a Beit Shar, leading out of the Chatzer and into the middle house on both sides. Okay, and the two on the outside are going to bring their food of their erev into the most middle house, and he doesn't have to give any pass because of that. Okay, that's what this Gemara is saying. Wonderful. Okay, that's Shukach Barry. Thank you very much. We got it. Okay, let's continue in the Gemara over here on at the end of the third line on Daf Ayin Vav Amud Aleph. Just a second. Okay. Badik Lahu Rachba l'Rabbanan. Rachba asked his Talmidim the following question: Shtei chatzerot u'shnei batim b'neihem. It's interesting that they didn't bother giving us a picture of this, but you have two chatzerot, and you have, did they? No, they didn't. You have two chatzerot, okay, on two extremes, and there are two houses in between the two chatzerot, okay. Zeba derech zeh v'nasan eruva bazeh, v'zeba derech zeh v'nasan eruva bazeh. Each one went to the other and put his eruv in there. Kanu eruv alo. Are they kanu the eruv or not? Mi mashvina lahu legabe dahai bayis legabe dahai beis shar legabe dahai beis shar legabe dahai bayis. Do we say that each one brings an eruv to the other guy's house, right? And is that a legitimate place to put the eruv or not? In other words, or each house is a Beit Shar to the Chatzer outside it. But so as a Beit Shar, it's not an appropriate place to put an eruv. But in its own right, it's a house where people live. So does it legitimize the eruv as a result of that? Let's look at Rashi now. Rashi from the second line. Badik, Menasseim chachmu lahashiv. He's trying to see if they know the answer. Shtei chatzerot u'shnei batim beinehem. Ve'en be'shnei chatzerot. Ve'en b'nei shtei chatzerot rotzin la'arev zomza. Excuse me. The two owners of the chatzer are not trying to make a mutual eruv. Each one is trying to make an eruv on his own right, between himself and the chatzer outside. The chol chatzer lo hinicha eruva bebayit hapatuach la. The chatzer did not put the eruv in the house that's open to it. Ela asato beit shar. They viewed the house adjacent to the chatzer as a mere beit shar. So in other words, you have here the picture of the following. On the extreme right is a chatzer. Right next to it is a house. Right next to one house is a second house. And right next to the second house is a chatzer on the other side. Right? Okay. Now, they're not trying to make an eruv with each other. What they're trying to do is to is to get the outer Chatzer into their permissibility of carrying over there, right? And so, in other words, the guy who from one Chatzer, or the Eruv of one Chatzer, instead of putting his Eruv in the house adjacent to his Chatzer, he puts it in the far house. And the guy on the other side does the exact same thing, of course, in the opposite way. The guy living in the far Chatzer puts his Eruv not in the house adjacent to his Chatzer, but to the far house. What is
avoiding putting it in the Beit Shar?
Yes, in effect, they're putting it in the Beit Shar. That ends up being the problem.
But it's the Beit Shar of the other Chatzer.
Well, I mean, from the perspective of the person living in the house, it's where he lives. From the perspective of the other house, it's a Beit Shar to the Chatzer. Is that what you meant to say?
When we say the Beit, you have Chatzer, house, Chatzer.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so a house serves as a Beit Shar to a Chatzer.
Yes.
Not to the other house. Or am I not understanding this correctly? There's the function. What makes it the Beit Shar? Because it's adjacent to the house, or because it's adjacent to the Chatzer?
So let's just move back a bit, okay, to the previous sugya. So we're not going to be talking Stam and the Volta, right? Okay. We're now for a moment 8 lines from the bottom of Ayin Hey Amud Bet. Okay. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Asara batim ze lefnim mizeh. Pnimi notenet eruvo v'dayo. Rav Yochanan Amar afilu chitzon. Even the one outside the pnimi. The Gemara asks chitzon beit sharhu. No, excuse me. The afilu chitzon. The havamin is it means even the one all the way on the outside. So the Gemara asks chitzon is a beit sharhu, isn't it a beit shar? So the Gemara answers chitzon shel pnimi. Mar savar beit shar diachid shmei beit shar, umar savar lo shmei beit shar. Each house seems to be beit shar for the previous houses, not for the chatzer. Okay. So let's get back to our case. You have a chatzer. You have the house next to the chatzer, the house next to that house, and the chatzer on the other side. Each house would appear to be a beit shar for the other house from that perspective. Okay. So Rachba asks, and each one put his eruv in the other house. What's the din? So again, let's read from the Gemara inside in the third line, the end of the third line. Badakluhu Rachba. Rachba asks the following question: the Rabbanan, excuse me. Shtei chatzeros shnei batim b'neihem. Zeh b'derech zeh v'nasen eruva b'zeh. V'zeh b'derech zeh v'nasen eruva b'zeh. Kanu eruv or lo? Is it a good eruv or not? Mashvinen lehu legabe dahai bias legabe dahai beishar legabe dahai beishar legabe dahai bias. In other words, for the purpose of putting the eruv there, it's going to have to be a bias. But for the purpose of getting, but technically speaking, each house is a beit shar of the other house. So the Talmidim answered, Amrulei, Shnehem lo kanu eruv. Neither of them succeeded in making an eruv in what they did. Why? Manavshach. I beit shar mashvitlei, if you perceive it as a beit shar, Hanosin as eruva b'beit shar or an achsadra or a mirpeset, ain't no eruv. A beit shar is inappropriate for the placement of an eruv. Ibayis mashvislei, if it's if you're viewing the second house not as a Beit Shar, but as a house, Kamataltel lebayis lo ma'ariv le. You're carrying into a house which is not included in the Eruv. Look at Rashi. Kamataltel kol chatzer bevayis lo ma'ariv le. In other words, there is no common Eruv for these two houses. They are separate Eruvin, which are not connected to each other. So basically, you end up with nothing. Okay. The Gemara now asks, Umayshna midirabba, how is this different than the case of Rabbah? What's the case of Rabbah? That's following the Masarat Shas connection. The Amar Rabbah said the following. Amru lo shnayim. Two people tell one person the following. Seva arev aleinu. Make an eruv for us. Le'echad irev alav miva'od yom. For one of them, he made an eruv before Shabbos began. Le'echad irev alav ben hashmashos. And for the second one, he made an eruv ben hashmashos. The one who made the eruv before the beginning of Shabbos, his eruv was eaten during the ben hashmashos, but was extant at the beginning of ben hashmashos. The one who he put the eruv ben hashmashos, nechal eruvo mishetechshach. His eruv was also eaten, but it only got eaten after it got dark. Shnehem kanu eruv. Both of them legitimately acquired the eruv. Okay, let's see the Rashi here. Shnehem kanu eruv. Alma mishum de ben hashmashos safeku. Ben hashmashos is a safek. The safek de divreihem lahakel. We can be makel, even in a contradictory way. The eruv midivreihem hu. I'm sorry, just 1 second. Again, Shneim kanu eruv alma mishum de ben hashmashos safeku. The safek midivreihem lahakel. The eruv midivreihem. The need for an eruv is only midrabanan hu. The gabehai shenechal eruv ben hashmashos. The one whose eruv was eaten ben hashmashos, mashvinu leilelya. We treat ben hashmashos as nighttime, and since it was in existence at the beginning of ben hashmashos, it's a legitimate eruv. V'aminan kvar kana eruv at the beginning. For the second guy, Shiur v'lav ben hashmashos, he made the eruv during ben hashmashos. Mashvinu leyom. We treat ben hashmashos as daytime. V'adayin havel shehus l'knot shvisa. So, the eruv we're talking about here is clearly eruv techumin, right? The point is that we're makil on this din d'Rabbanan in both directions, right? Right? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And so, what does that have to do with what we were talking about? The assumption is over here that the seeming contradiction, let's read over the case that the Talmidim of Rachba said is no good. Amrulei shneim l'konu eruv. Why? Manavshach. Beis shar mash the slave to saying that the second house is a Beis shar. Hanosin say rubu Beis shar. Achsarim petzes eno eruv. Bayis mash the slave. You say no, it's not a Beis shar. It's a bayis. So kombetalto the bayis duloma arivle. You're carrying Rashi again. This Rashi is very important to me. So the question is like this: if instead of looking at it as it's possible if it's a Beit Shar, and if it's a bias, you put it in the wrong place. Why do you say no? We're not going to treat it as a Beit Shar because it's a Safek D'Rabbanan, and Safek D'Rabbanan is L'Kula. And we're going to treat it as a house where there is an Eruv because they did try to put an Eruv in that house, right? So the Gemara answers. Like this. Heichi hashta. We're now 5 lines from the end of the parak. How can you make the comparison to the case of the Eruv Tchumin? Chasam Safek Yimama Safek Lelia. There it's a Safek whether it's daytime or nighttime. There's been a Shmasha, it's a Safek daytime or nighttime. Lo Minkara Milsa. There's no apparent psul. Look at the Rashi. The last Rashi. Lo minkra milsa v'lo hava mili drabanan kituka vitlula. Each one relying on the validity of his erev techumin is relying on it separately, and there's no internal stira in what's happening. I'm reading now in the Gemara again, the 4th to last line. Avlahacha, or over here. If this one is treating it like a house, legabi dahai bias, and the other one has to treat it like a house also. Ilegabi dahai beishar, legabi dahai nami beishar. In other words, if it's a beishar, then how do you want to kasha this eruv? You want to kasha this eruv by saying that, look, the one who didn't put it there, he's viewing it as a Beit Shar, and in his house is the real house, is the real eruv. But from the other guy's perspective, the other house is a Beit Shar, and his house is a place for a proper eruv, right? So why, if in the case of eruv tchumin, each one can look at it from his own perspective, why can't we allow each one to look at it from his own perspective in our case as well? In other words, if it works for you that the other guy's house is Beit Shar and your house is a real bias, then good. And if it works for him the opposite, it also then good. So it says, the Gemara says no. Hasam safek yamama safek lelelo minkrumis avahacha idil gabe high bias. If for this guy this is a house, the gabe the high bias, it has to be a bias for the other one also. You're trying to make a mutual eruv. Idil gabe the high beishar, the gabe the high nami beishar. In other words, within the context of making a mutual eruv, you can't have one person looking at it as a beishar and the other person looking at it as a bias. And since in order for this to work, you're going to have one person looking at it as a Beit Shar and the other person looking at it as a bias, this eruv doesn't work. And that's the Hadron Alach Hadar, Hadron Alach Hadar, Hadron Alach Hadar. Thank you very much. We should be running out of time momentarily in any case. Linetta, we will start the next parak next week. Thank you. Shalom.
Well, thank you.